So first let us start with Hadoop introduction, and uh, then we will get into the actual topics. Okay, so first we will try to understand what is big data, what are Hadoop core components, and what is Hadoop ecosystem, and also we will see brief differences between Oracle and Hadoop. Okay, so in case if my voice is not clear or if you feel any uncomfortable, let me know immediately so that I can figure out a solution for it. Okay, so history, as I have mentioned in the Kickstart session, big data, you can say, is started with Google. Okay, so at the time, most of the IT solutions are catered for enterprises, and they used to provide solutions for banking, retail, etc. But Google, because of the success of the internet, Google want to come up with a search engine where anyone can actually go into a website and search for relevant content for the search criteria. And when they started implementing, they started with the RDBMS, Relational Database Management System, which is MySQL, for their search engine. So they used to crawl all the websites available in the internet, and then they try to load the data into MySQL and provide the search results when someone queries when someone search for some information over the web. So MySQL, the cluster went up to 2000 nodes of MySQL databases, and then it has become completely unmanageable. And the reason why they chose MySQL was that there was no other alternative. There was only relational database at that time. And if you are from computers background and if you have studied RDBMS, Relational Database Management System, there was a huge emphasis on CORS rules. And these CORS rules are primarily for transaction-based systems. So when I say transaction is on web. Transaction involves money, payment, etc. So when it comes to transactions, multiple tables, multiple records in multiple tables have to be updated and committed or rolled back as one unit. If all the operations are not committed or rolled back as one unit, then the data will be in inconsistent state, which will impact the business. That's when CORS rules came into picture, and all the RDBMSs started implementing CORS rules because RDBMS is the only solution to address transactions. So at the time when Google just started, there was no other alternative. There was only RDBMS databases, and they have chosen MySQL from the list of RDBMSs that are available. When they realized that RDBMS is not the solution for them, they have developed a solution from scratch. They have developed something called GFS, Google File System, which is distributed file system, and then they have invented MapReduce, which is distributed processing on multiple nodes in the cluster, and a Bigtable, which is a kind of a indexed table. So the way it works is Google crawls all the web pages over the internet and get the data and dump into this distributed file system, and then the MapReduce runs in batches, and MapReduce is developed in tandem with GFS. So MapReduce understands GFS very well. So distributed processing is introduced to process the data in distributed fashion so that it can scale over time. And once the data is processed, data is indexed in such a way that it can be retrieved as quickly as possible. So Bigtable is the indexed table structure wherein there will be a key and value. The key could be the search words which you typically use, and the value could be the search results. So they have designed Bigtable in such a way that when you start typing, it comes as form of suggestions because of this Bigtable as a data store. And then there are some other web layers also which you don't need to worry about. Just understand that we have a distributed file system called GFS, distributed processing called MapReduce, and then distributed indexed table called Bigtable. So the characteristics of big data, as you understand from Google's data, they have to crawl hundreds and thousands, if not millions of web pages every day. And then they have to process that data as quickly as possible. So if you think about characteristics of big data, there are three characteristics: volume, variety, and velocity. So volume is the amount of data that needs to be stored or processed. So if you think about it, Google has to process terabytes of data, if not petabytes of data, almost every day. And then variety. So when you think about web pages will have all kinds of data. You will have data of multiple languages. You will have data from images, videos, many forms of data. So if you broadly categorize the variety of data, it is considered to be structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. So structured means typical data which you store into the table. Table have a structure of columns, data type, etc. So that is called as structured. And the unstructured means your tweets, the blogs that are available over the internet, any free flow text where there is no rigid structure is called unstructured. Semi-structured means your Twitter is considered to be semi-structured, except the tweet, everything have a structure that needs to be followed. So these three are the variety: structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. And velocity. So just storing the data of huge volume is not good enough. It has to be stored as fast as possible, and also it has to be processed as fast as possible. For example, right now it's election season in US. So if a presidential candidate is announced yesterday, you should know yesterday itself. If it is announced today, you should know today. Okay. If it shows last year's results, if you search for presidential candidate in US without any year or anything, it should first show the current presidential candidate. If it is just announced, it has to show as quickly as possible. So velocity is very important. You have to get the relevant results. Otherwise, user experience will take a hit, and users will stop using these applications. So again, volume is the amount of data that needs to be stored. Variety is structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. Velocity is the pace at which the data has to be stored, and also the data has to be processed, and also the data can be retrieved. All these considered to be velocity. Okay, so anything, any of two. Most of the use cases might not have all the three characteristics. Even if there are two of them, then you can start thinking about implementing big data. So again, when it comes to applications with respect to big data, there are two types of applications: batch and operational, but not transactional. So batch is, as I have explained to you, crawling the web pages by Google and dumping into GFS, and also processing the data and building the index needs to be done in batches. You cannot process each and every record, one record at a time. You have to do it in batches. So crawling the web pages and storing into distributed file system, and also processing the data and then porting the data into indexed tables is done in batches. Operational but not transactional. Again, if you take the example of Google itself, when you try to search the results, you go to google.com and try searching for Hadoop or big data. It has to give the response as quickly as possible. That is called as operational. Operational is typically interactive. Okay, so any use case such as Google search engine, which is operational but not transactional, can be implemented using these NoSQL databases, which are derived from Google Bigtable. There are many examples over the internet which are implemented using these NoSQL databases. Facebook Messenger is implemented with HBase, and LinkedIn endorsements. Most of the modules of LinkedIn is actually implemented with NoSQL, which you interact on daily basis. So take any website, especially from the technology companies such as Netflix, Facebook, LinkedIn, and many more. All of them use some sort of distributed file system, some sort of distributed processing, and some sort of indexed tables such as NoSQL. These technologies are being used heavily in most of the technology firms. Now it is getting slowly into the enterprises. When I say enterprises, all retail firms, banks, etc. are considered as enterprises. Okay, so now we will get into Hadoop. Hadoop has two core components. One is the HDFS for storage. HDFS stands for Hadoop Distributed File System, and the second one is Yarn plus MapReduce, which is for distributed processing. So before getting into Hadoop, let us revisit typical RDBMS architecture using Oracle as an example. So typically, with most of the modern architectures, when it comes to using Oracle as the database, for the transactional systems, this is the architecture. So you have a storage rack. Storage rack is like our desktop. It looks like our desktop, and it only have drives to install hard disks. It will not have very expensive motherboard or very expensive CPUs. There will be small motherboard, means lower cost motherboard and lower cost CPU, which is required for that, but not fancy motherboard or graphics card. You don't have all those things. You just have a rack with the motherboard and CPU to support the storage, and then there will be many slots to install hard disks. So it will look like a desktop only, but you will have tens to hundreds of slots to install hard disks. So if you think from the desktop perspective, our desktops typically have 250 GB hard disk or 512 GB hard disk or a 1 terabyte hard disk. We will have only one, okay? And if you have only one hard disk of size 1 terabyte, your file can be at max 1 terabyte. It cannot go beyond the capacity of your hard disk. Even if you have two hard disks of 1 terabyte each, still you can only store at max 1 terabyte file. Means size of any given file cannot be more than 1 terabyte, even if you have two hard disks with 1 terabyte each. That is very important to understand that limitation, that even though you have multiple hard disks, typically in our PCs, we cannot have a file greater than the size of the hard disk, okay? Because there is no abstraction on top of it. So there is a very important concept called file abstraction. The theory behind file abstraction is a given file can be larger than any one hard disk in the server. So in case of storage server, why I am explaining all this is there will be a software in storage server which will take care of this concept, a very important concept called file abstraction. Again, you will hear about file abstraction when we talk about Hadoop also, but it's a very important term, file abstraction. The meaning of it is a file can be larger than any one hard disk in a storage server. So let's say you have 1 terabyte hard disks of means you have 6 1 terabyte hard disks. So the overall capacity of this storage server is 6 terabytes. But even though you have 6 terabytes capacity, you cannot store a file which is larger than 1 terabyte, because it will typically the entire file will go onto one hard disk. But when it comes to storage server, there will be a software on top of it multiple softwares. One is to give file abstraction, and second one is something called RAID. RAID is very important concept, which includes mirroring and striping, where your data either will have multiple copies or it will be striped in such a way that even if some of the hard disks are failed, still using the existing hard disk we can retrieve the data. So that is called as striping and mirroring. Don't worry too much about it. Only thing you need to understand is the storage servers will have software which takes care of file abstraction and also the failover of hard disks using the concept of RAID. Once you have these hard disks, we actually carve out the amount of storage required for our database. So if our database requires 2 terabytes out of this 6 terabytes available capacity, we will create a pool of storage and that will be given to the database server. So this green colored rectangle is nothing but the storage pool required for one of the databases. Okay, and then there will be network switch and there will be multiple database servers. So when we say database servers, they are nothing but CPU and RAM with some storage, and that storage is typically to install the software on those database servers, like Oracle binaries. If we try to install Oracle, we will have binary setup on each of these database servers. So you have compute, which is CPU plus memory on all these database servers, and you have storage here, and then both the storage and the database servers are connected with network switch. Okay, so now let's say you write a query like select star from or select count of star from employee table to get the list of count of employees in an organization. The request from the web layer, whatever the user interacting with, will come to the database in the form of SQL. Okay, if you have some development background, you will understand it. You will implement a 3-tier architecture where the client will be typically a browser, and then there will be a bunch of Java code which will be executed when you perform any action on the web page. Those actions will typically translate into SQL queries. So in this case, if the user wants to get the count of employees in an organization, it will translate into SQL query, and the database server will get that SQL query as a request. And the software that is there on these database servers will actually compile the query into its proprietary code, and that proprietary code will have APIs to perform the network I/O. So in this case, when to get the employee data, to get the count, the database servers have to get the employee data, and that actual data will be in the storage layer. So there will be a lot of network I/O that will be happening to retrieve data from the storage layer with this architecture. So this architecture works very well for typical transactional based applications, but the same architecture will become significant overhead when we try to do batch processing for analytics purposes or use cases such as Google, where the search engines are implemented, recommendation engines, etc. Okay, and also there will be additional network switches. Typically, Oracle clusters will have 3 network switches: one for communication between the database servers and the storage, one for interconnectivity between these 3 database servers, and the third one for public activity. Okay. So that is the architecture for Oracle. Now we will try to understand the Hadoop architecture. The main thing which you need to take it here is, when it comes to RDBMS architecture, I have given Oracle architecture as an example, but it is applicable for any RDBMS. For a given database, the RDBMS structure architecture will actually have the storage decoupled from the processing and memory. So storage is here, separated from processing and memory. Whereas any big data architecture, which includes Hadoop, typically you have storage and processing co-located. Okay, so each and every node in the cluster, typically there will be hundreds of nodes in the cluster. Each and every node will have storage and processing Whereas with the Oracle, you will hardly have 3 to 4 database servers. In some cases, it might go up to 8 to 10, but not more than that. You don't see hundreds of database servers in one for supporting one Oracle database. That is not possible. Whereas in Hadoop architecture, whereas when it comes to Hadoop, you can even see thousands of nodes in the cluster, not just 3 or 4 or 8 or 10. It can be thousands also, and each of them have storage and processing in the same physical servers. Okay, so these are commodity servers, which looks like our age-old desktops, which will have CPU, memory, storage, everything together, and the storage and processing will be co-located. And then these are termed as slaves, which are on the right side, and there will be masters to coordinate these components. So there will be a couple of masters to coordinate the storage aspect of it, and then there will be a couple of masters to take care of processing aspects of it. Okay, so this is so if you actually replace with the proper technology for storage, we use the term called HDFS in Hadoop and MapReduce for processing. And if you want to replace with actual terms, when it comes to HDFS, all the slaves will have data nodes supporting the storage, and masters are termed as name node and secondary name node in typical Hadoop setup. And we will take care of those things over the next couple of weeks, setting up all these components one at a time. So when it comes to processing, I will talk about those things in detail later, because there are 2 frameworks, and you need to have brief knowledge of the older framework called MRV1 or Classic, and then you have to have deep understanding about MRV2 or YARN. So this is the typical Hadoop cluster. On the right side, you have a bunch of slaves. On the left side, you have a handful of masters. So the slaves will be almost 95% of the cluster for medium to larger clusters. So if you have 100 nodes, the number of masters will be 6 to 8. Even if you have 1000 nodes, it might go up to 10, not more than that. You typically will not have more than 10 masters. So that's why on the left side, which represents master side, I had only 3 servers. So each of these rectangles are actually physical servers. So each one will have RAM, each one will have RAM means memory, each one will have storage and CPUs. Okay, and then for storage aspect, we have HDFS. So there will be components installed for HDFS on all the slaves and on some masters. And for processing also, we will have we will install YARN on all the nodes in the cluster and few masters. Okay, and then all these things are connected through network switch. So this network switch or switches should have capacity. Means network switch is like your Wi-Fi cable. There will be on your Wi-Fi router there will be Ethernet ports. So even these network switches will look like a very big Wi-Fi router, and it will have hundreds of ports like that, not just 2 or 4 which you typically see in the Wi-Fi router. Instead, it can have few tens to hundreds of ports, and here we have 24 and 27 servers. All these 27 servers will be hooked up into this network switch. Okay, so that they can communicate with each other. If you have a larger cluster, there can be multiple network switches which we need to take care. No, you don't need to know about the networks as Hadoop admin. For networking, there will be network admins. You have to work with them. So first, there will be data center engineers who will be taking care of setting up the hardware, and as part of them, there will be few folks who will be network engineers who will take care of connecting these servers. You don't need to take care of networking, but you should understand how the architecture will look like. I'm responding to a question by Venkat. He asked, do we need to know about networks also for Hadoop admin? The answer is no, you don't need to. Okay, when you ask the questions, make it, send it to everyone so that everyone also have a view about the questions. Okay, so when we replace with the actual terms of a given technology, for HDFS on all the slaves we have data nodes, on masters we have name node and secondary name node. For yarn we have node managers on all the slaves and resource manager as master. So I am just giving an example. Don't worry what is this name node, what is this secondary name node, what is resource manager, what is data node, what is node manager, etc. Everything will be clear within next couple of classes. And then network switch to connect everything together. So as I have explained, we have spoken about the distributed file system and the MapReduce or plus yarn. Okay, distributed file system is HDFS. For distributed processing, we typically use MapReduce, but there are non-MapReduce solutions also. The reason is MapReduce as a technology to develop the applications. It is very good when it comes to processing very large data in batches. Okay, but MapReduce cannot support the solution developed using MapReduce cannot be interactive. When I say interactive, let's say you want to search using Google. Okay, if they use MapReduce as the solution, when you type a keyword and when you hit enter, it will take very long time to process the data and show the results, which is not interactive. Even though you will get the results, it might take a few minutes to few hours if they use MapReduce based solutions behind your search behind your searches. That is not interactive. So to make it interactive, there are other tools we can categorize as non-MapReduce. You will understand why I am segregating this when we actually start deploying it. But just understand that at the bottom we have HDFS, which supports not only MapReduce based tools but also non-MapReduce based tools, and then we have a bunch of technologies which can use MapReduce or other set of technologies which use non-MapReduce to process the data. So this layer is to process the data. So storage and processing are considered as core components. On top of these core components, there are other Hadoop ecosystem tools which are created for some specific purposes. I will give a couple of examples here. One example is Hive. Hive looks like SQL. So instead of writing MapReduce program on top of structured data for each and every module, you can use something called Hive, which follows the SQL type of syntax. And when I type SQL query in Hive, it will actually compile into a MapReduce program, which is nothing but Java code, and then as a MapReduce job to process the data. So these are the tools to simplify the development process for reusable components such as processing the structured data. So Hive is SQL type of interface which uses MapReduce to process the data in distributed fashion. Scoop is an export-import utility where you can export data from, where you can pull data from a relational database such as Oracle and MySQL and load into HDFS. Like that, there are a bunch of other tools also. You will understand most of these tools as we proceed with the course. Okay. Now we will see the differences between Oracle and Hadoop. Again, we will recap the architecture of the Oracle. We have storage layer, which is nothing but a storage server with a bunch of hard disks, out of which the storage admins will create a logical volume of the storage for a given database, whatever DBS have asked for. And then you have a network switch, and then you have the CPU and memory with some storage for Oracle binaries on these database servers, and all these things are connected with network switch, a couple of network switches. So this is the typical Oracle architecture. Okay, and if you try to replace the terms, so servers are nothing but cluster of servers with the same binaries and configuration. So if you go back to this picture, all the database servers will have same version of Oracle binaries installed. Oracle binaries are nothing but the software, and that software will be installed on all the 3 hosts in the cluster. To install that software, all these 3 database servers need to have local storage. In most of the cases, we use local storage for the database servers, or there will be a network mount point also, but it is viewed as dedicated storage for the database server. But this one, which is intended for actual data storage, the actual data in the sense, and the data in the tables which you create is mounted on all the 3 nodes. But there could be some dedicated mount points also onto the database servers to store the binaries of the Oracle software. Okay, and all of them run the same backend process. So if you are familiar with Oracle, there are several backend processes. For example, SMON, PMON, etc. So these will be running on all the nodes in the cluster. Storage is typically network file system, and it is mounted to all the database servers. It's a common storage mounted to all the database servers. Software binaries will be installed on all the servers. Parameter files, so any software, take any software, whether it is Oracle, WebLogic, Hadoop, anything which is enterprise level application, you will have binaries or software for that technology, and then there will be some daemon process or background process that will be running. And to customize the behavior based upon the requirements of the projects, there will be bunch of parameter files. Okay, for Oracle, those parameter files are init.aura, p file, sp file, etc. Even for Hadoop, we will see bunch of parameter files as we proceed in the course. And then you will have memory. The amount when it comes to Oracle, you need to have same amount of memory on all the nodes in the cluster. And then there are memory structures, FGA, PGA, etc. And the network, typically 3 network switches, one for interconnect of nodes, one to connect with storage, one for public connectivity. So this is the typical Oracle architecture, or this is applicable for most of the traditional RDBMSs. The terms are a little bit different, but more or less the architecture will be same. When it comes to Hadoop architecture, so as I have mentioned to you earlier, you will have storage and processing co-located together on all the slaves, and then there will be handful of masters to coordinate a given component of Hadoop, one for storage and one for processing. Okay, so now we will talk about Hadoop components. Actually, this is already covered, so we don't need to do that. Okay, now we will talk about Hadoop architecture. So, Hadoop architecture, there will be cluster of servers with same binary system configuration. Majority, but not all of them, will have same background process. Okay, and storage. So, why I say majority, but not all of them will have same background process? If you go back to this slide, okay, if you see on slaves for storage, you will get you will find a different daemon process. On masters, you will find a different daemon process. But as there are many slaves, all the slaves will have the same background process, but masters might not have the same background process. So that's why I made the statement majority, but not all of them will have the same background process. Storage, we typically use local file system on all the hosts. We don't use network file system. There are only few exceptions where network file system is required, and I will explain it when the time comes. Softwares, binaries will be installed on all the servers, and all the servers needs to be consistent with the same set of binaries. Parameter files, there will be a bunch of XML files. Backend process, you have name node on masters, on HDFS master, data node on all slaves, resource manager on processing master, and node manager on all the slaves. So backend process are the majority of them have data node and node manager, and some of them have name node, resource manager, etc. Memory, it is highly recommended to have same amount of memory on all the nodes in the cluster, but it is not mandatory. Like Oracle, it has to be mandatory. Here, it is not mandatory. And in some cases, when we actually do the upgrades, we will. I will explain in a moment what mounting means. So let's finish off this slide. Then I will go back to that. So memory, as I have been explaining. So when we actually upgrade the cluster, when we have 1000 nodes in a cluster, we will take 10 or 20 at a time, and we will keep upgrading in rolling fashion when it comes to upgrading Hadoop clusters. So because upgrading can be hardware upgrades also, means you might increase the RAM, you might want to increase the RAM, you might want to increase the CPU, or you might want to add more capacity. Okay, so in those cases where you want to do this rolling upgrade, the underlying hardware of the servers which are being upgraded and which are not upgraded will be little bit different. So when it comes to hardware configurations, for typical Oracle databases or any RDBMS, the configuration has to be same all the time, whereas in Hadoop, it is required, it is recommended, but not mandatory. Memory structures are typically JVMs. Some are permanent and some are transient. Again, you will understand when we actually start talking about setting up the Hadoop cluster and reviewing the components. Network, there will be one or more network switches which will connect all the nodes. So there is a question, can you please explain what is mounting means? Mounting means if you are from Linux background, apart from memory and CPU, anything else is viewed as a external resource, including hard disk, which is storage, and CD-ROM. So we have to mount that, mount to the operating system. So operating system know certain metadata of the hard disks, etc. So in this case, over the network, what we are trying to do, we are trying to create a storage pool for our database server, and we have to mount. Means system admins will run certain commands to connect the storage over the network with this database servers. That is called as mounting, connecting the storage with the computing and memory, or CPUs and memory. And that is also not responsible of Hadoop administrator or Oracle administrator. We as Hadoop or Oracle administrators will typically ask network admins and storage admins to set it up for us, and they will take care of it, and they will see mount points which you need to use it. But you don't mount the storage by yourself. It is the responsibility of the system engineers. Okay, now theoretical differences. Batch versus non-batch. Oracle is fine-tuned for OLTP. OLTP stands for Online Transaction Processing Systems, which are both operational as well as transactional. So operational means the operations which happens in real time, in interactive fashion. So transactional means multiple operations have to be committed or rolled back as one transaction. Example for operation is, you can take any example which happens in real time, like the discussion which is going on right now is kind of operational. The chart which is which can happen in WebEx is kind of operational. Okay, but when it comes to transactional, debiting money from one account and crediting to another account. So one account can be in Bank of America, another account can be in Wells Fargo, and it has to touch multiple tables of Bank of America, and it has to touch multiple tables of Wells Fargo, and everything has to be committed or rolled back as one unit. If something goes wrong, everything has to be committed or rolled back as one unit. For example, after debiting the money, if there is an exception, and if it does not roll back the entire transaction completely, then money will be deducted from the Bank of America account, but it will not be credited in the Wells Fargo account, which is scary, which is not user friendly at all. So transactional means everything has to be committed or rolled back as one unit. So Oracle is fine-tuned for those kinds of systems which are operational and transactional, following all the CORS rules. And it supports batch, but it cannot scale. If you want to process huge amounts of data, it cannot scale using Oracle. And then data locality, very important. In Oracle, data comes to code. In Hadoop, code goes to data. The second part you will understand later, but the first part I will explain right away. So as I have explained earlier, when you issue a query such as select count of star from EMP or employee table to get the number of employees from the table, your data for the employee table will be here in the storage layer, and the processing can only happen at the database servers. It cannot happen at the storage layer. So from the external application, you will get the query such as select count of star from EMP to get the number of employees. If it is 10 GB table, and if it does not have indexes, for hypothetical scenario, just forget forget about indexes. Assume that there are no indexes. So the entire 10 GB data needs to be read via network onto the database server, and then it has to go through each and every record to finish the count. Okay, so the storage, the data is at the storage layer, and the code, the select query which you received will be compiled at the database server layer and executed at the database server layer. Okay, only thing it will do to get the data is I/O, and I/O is also part of the code which will be generated after compiling the SQL query. Okay. So if you think about the life cycle of the query, once the query is compiled, it will perform the network I/O to read the data from the table which is given in the front clause of the select count of star from query, which is EMP in this case. So it will read the 10 GB of data over network switch. It will go to the database server. The data has to be loaded into the memory. So to process anything, it has to be in memory. Only then the processing will happen. Once the I/O is done, data will be in the memory, and then the code will be executed on the data in memory to get the count. So here the point which you need to take is data is coming to code. If you don't understand anything else, it is fine. You don't need to worry about it. Only thing you need to understand is the data which is on the storage layer has to go to code, which is compiled here and executed here using CPUs and memory on the database servers. Whereas in Hadoop, we will typically submit processing jobs using Hadoop jar command, and we will give the jar file name and the class name which needs to be executed. So in that case, what will happen is the jar file will go to the processing component of each of the node. So a client will submit the Hadoop jar command, and processing happens on these servers, and the jar file will be copied to this processing layer. Again, I will re-emphasize when we talk about MapReduce later, but now just remember that when it comes to Oracle, the processing, data comes to processing, whereas in Hadoop, when we submit MapReduce jobs, the processing of code goes to data, because storage and processing are co-located together. So it can actually process the data which is available on that host itself, and we will actually understand that when we talk about MapReduce later. Okay. So that is very important. In Oracle, data comes to code, and in Hadoop, code goes to data, and the term is called as data locality. And second, very important is scalability. So when it comes to Oracle, it cannot scale linearly because of the CORS rules. It has to apply so many rules when the data is being inserted or read. For example, when in Oracle you will create a table. When you create the table, you will give the column names, data types, etc. And then there will be a primary key constraint, foreign key constraint, etc. And when you insert the data, for each and every operation internally, the insert command will be compiled into a code which will apply all those rules which are defined by creating the table. So for example, let's say telephone number, and if you say varchar2 or char of 10, means the telephone number cannot be more than 10 characters. And when you insert every record, the telephone number has to be validated whether it is 10 characters, whether it is less than or equal to 10 characters or not. So which includes execution of certain logic for each and every insert operation. Because of such kind of overheads, databases such as Oracle cannot scale linearly. They can scale, but it will not scale linearly. When it comes to Hadoop, it can scale linearly for most of the use cases, but for complex use cases such as sorting, typically you will not get linear scalability, but it can achieve desired scalability. Again, I will cover this aspect when we talk about MapReduce at the latter point in time. And so now we understood, I hope we understood the Hadoop ecosystem. There are core components, there are Hadoop ecosystem tools, etc. Okay, and now we will try to understand what is this Cloudera, Hortonworks, Mapr, and many more. You might have heard about all these things, and what is the relationship with the actual ecosystem tools which I have explained earlier. For that, you need to understand the relevance of Apache. Okay, Apache is a company which takes the ownership of the open source code. Okay, so for example, for that you need to understand how the open source development happens. So open source development happens by volunteers who will not be paid for developing these things. So these guys pool together and develop a particular technology, and they incubate. And someone has to take the ownership after it is incubated, and Apache will take care of it. So Apache is the open source incubation company. Okay, and all these tools which I have explained earlier, Hadoop ecosystem tools, HDFS, MapReduce, Hive, Pig, Scoop, Oozie, Impala, HBase, Presto, which are termed as, which are typically open source, are incubated in Apache. So here, let's take this as this section as Apache section, where we have all the big data related tools available. Now, if we go back to the earlier slide where we have seen a typical Hadoop cluster, in this we have many nodes, masters and slaves. As I have explained earlier, you need to understand this process. To install any software, first you need to download the software, deploy or install the software, and then you have to configure. So any software is a three-step process: download it, install it, and configure it, and then start it so that it will be up and running, which is applicable for some, which is not applicable for some others. But downloading, installing, and configuration is applicable across any technology you think of. Even for most of the desktop technologies also, you need to download, you need to install, you need to configure. But typically we will use the default settings, but advanced users customize for their usage to increase the productivity. Okay, like any other technology, even in Hadoop, we have to download the software, whatever we want to install, and then install it on the cluster, and then we have to configure it. And now it is not as simple as your PC where you just download it and install it. You have to deal with hundreds of nodes. So if you don't have any tools to do that, then what you have to do, you have to download the binaries of all the technologies which you want to set up, and then you have to install on each and every node, and then you have to configure. Configuring includes integrating the tools. So on one host it might not be very difficult, but on hundreds of nodes it is very difficult. On top of that, that is only the installation part of it. Once it is installed, it has to be supported. Okay, so to support also you should get alerts, and there should be monitoring tools which will tell how the cluster is performing over time, etc. So Apache might not have proper solutions for that. For that reason, companies like Cloudera, Hortonworks have created wrappers on top of the tools that are available on Apache. So they get the tools that are available on Apache, they bundle it, and they integrate with some user-friendly tools such as Cloudera Manager or Hortonworks Sambari, which will ease the setup of the clusters. So you don't need to worry about downloading individually on all the hosts and then install it and configure it. So you use these tools, which will simplify that installation process. And also they have features such as alerting, monitoring, etc. So Hortonworks, Cloudera and Mapper are the leading vendors which provide those interfaces. Cloudera provides Cloudera Manager, Hortonworks provide Hortonworks Sambari. I am not sure about Mapper. And then there are other companies such as IBM, Oracle, EMC or Pivotal, which have their own appliances or distributions. For example, Oracle Big Data Appliance comes with Hadoop and also ODI and a few other technologies which they think are good for enterprise to run their data warehousing and analytics. Okay, so as part of this Oracle Big Data Appliance, where there are a bunch of other tools, they provide Cloudera distribution of Hadoop as a Hadoop solution. Similarly, Pivotal, IBM Big Insights uses Hortonworks distribution internally. Okay, so by learning the core concepts of Hadoop and then applying this Cloudera and Hortonworks on top of it, even if you learn using Hortonworks or Cloudera, you can easily transition to other technologies. As long as you understand how the actual technologies work. Your emphasis should not be on Hortonworks or Cloudera. Your emphasis should be on how Hadoop works, Hive works, Scoop works, etc. Once you master over this, then anything is plug and play. Whether Hortonworks or Cloudera or Mapper or any other distribution is just plug and play once you learn the core aspects of Hadoop. So there is another question. So our admin course will be vendor neutral. Okay, I will be demonstrating few things on Cloudera, few things on Hortonworks, but hands-on purpose you can choose whatever you want, and you have to follow my videos to practice hands-on. So it's up to you to choose the distribution. Okay. So that being said, let's take 5-minute break. Okay, and then we'll catch up because it's 2-hour session. I want to take the break. From next class, we will take the break after 45 to 50 minutes because the class will be wrapped up within 1.5 hours to within 1.5 hours to 1 hour 40 minutes, and last 20 to 30 minutes will be Q&A session. So we'll take break at 40-45 minute range from the next class. Okay. That being said, we will take 5 minutes break for now. Just 5 minutes. Make sure you join within 5 minutes. I'm starting recording, and please confirm that you guys can watch my screen and also you guys can hear me. Hello, can you hear me and can you watch my screen? Please someone confirm on chat. Okay. So we'll wrap up probably in 15-20 minutes because I doubt it will survive for a very long time. Anyway, so now I will actually tell what will be the next thing you need to follow. So we have completed the Hadoop introduction part of it, and now how we will take it forward. Again, as I have been explaining, in the classes I will only cover the theory aspect of it, emphasizing all those core topics which are highly relevant on job as well as for the questions which you face. the questions need not be interviews alone. Okay, it could be even when you are if you work for a services company and if you have to put a proposal to the client, you will get a lot of questions from the client, and you should be able to answer those things because a few of the people are pretty senior folks, and they should know those details as well. So for that reason, I will try to highlight most of those questions, and so that you are well prepared. Whenever you face the questions, you are able to answer those things. Okay, that will be covered as part of the theory. Between the classes, you have to do lots of hands-on stuff. Okay, especially the first few days, it will take a lot of effort. After that, it will not be that much, and it will take a lot of effort for first few days. That too, if you are using virtual machines on your PC, it will be relatively slow compared to AWS for hands-on purpose. So for hands-on purpose, you need some material for the reference. For that, you can fall back on my YouTube channel. Okay, and here, if you click on playlists, you will find many playlists. Okay, and then there will be a Hadoop administration section, and you will see. I need to add a couple of more things here with respect to Cloudera, which I will be doing very soon. So if you see, there is Hadoop administration using Hortonworks AWS, Hadoop administration using Hortonworks only on virtual machines, and then this administration Hadoop using Cloudera distribution. These videos are from my old class, and these are also using AWS, but now I am actually preparing material similar to these two things. So use the latest one than this old version. So if you decide to go with Cloudera, use Cloudera related videos based on whether you are using AWS or VM. Okay. So it will take the step-by-step process. If you go with AWS, you will understand what is AWS, what are the costs that are involved when working on AWS, and then how to provision the servers, set up connectivity between your PC to the servers, and then other important concepts which I will be covering. Whenever it is relevant, you have to go to these videos for the hands-on purpose. For VM, it is a little bit different. You have to have at least 60 GB RAM, otherwise it will not work, because you have to create at least 4 VMs, 1 VM with 4 GB and 3 VMs with 2 GB. Okay, so you need to have 10 GB RAM allocated to these 4 VMs, and don't use Red Hat or CentOS desktop. You have to use expert installation when you actually set up. Again, if you go through these videos, you will see those steps, and you have to use only expert installation, because if you use Red Hat desktop versions, then 2 GB is very less memory for playing with other components. Okay, so you will be building a 4-node cluster using virtual machines. With AWS, I will recommend 7-node cluster. With virtual machines, I will recommend 4-node cluster. And these are the videos which will cover for Hadoop Hortonworks administration. For some of the advanced concepts, you have to use AWS only, because the memory of 4 GB and 2 GB might not be enough, especially when you start exploring Spark. Okay, so first start with the VMs, perform 2 or 3 dry runs, get familiar with Linux and Hadoop administration aspect of it. Then you go on to AWS and set up a 7-node or 9-node cluster. You can claim it as an experience also. You are doing a POC on VMs as well as AWS, so you can claim it as an experience also. Then I will cover those points which can be used to extrapolate using this experience of setting up POCs on AWS or VM, so that you can easily answer those questions. So I will emphasize on those important points. Okay. So for Hadoop administration Hortonworks on AWS, this is the playlist. For Hadoop administration Hortonworks VM, this is the playlist. When I upload this video onto the YouTube channel, I will provide these links also as annotations. Okay, probably it might burn within next 5 minutes itself. So probably we will wrap up very soon. Sorry for that because we lost the power. There is a generator in our community, but I think the generator is only giving the limited access. Only my Wi-Fi router and a few other things are working, lights and fans. No power ports are working. Okay, and then I will add all the 4 URLs as annotations for all these classes, not only this class, for all the classes. So whatever distribution you choose, you can follow the playlist. And then for the PowerPoint presentations and also scripts which are required, you can go to the GitHub account. There seems to be some question. Let me. So for the certificate purpose, I recommend Hortonworks. Okay, because the exam is more hands-on approach, whereas Cloudera is all 60 questions. Means if I am the interviewer, I value Hortonworks certification more than Cloudera certification. But it need not be the case in the external world. For interview purpose, yeah, I cannot answer that question at this time. There will be a presentation for capacity planning, and we will talk at that time. So Shiva privately have asked me what would be our response for cluster size in an organization for interview purpose. My answer is we will see that as part of the probably next class or next to next class. I will cover the capacity planning extensively. Okay. So going back to the certification, yeah, make sure you prepare for Hortonworks unless there is a pressure from the company to go with Cloudera. For interview purpose, you should at least watch the videos of both and claim your experience in both the distributions, so that your interview means you will be eligible for more opportunities than just working on others. And you can claim this experience as POC. It's not that you are faking. You are investing money on AWS or on your laptop, and you are investing your time. So it is, means if I am the interviewer person, if I am the interviewer who is hiring, I will consider that as POCs also. And I prefer those candidates rather than who work on the existing clusters, because these guys will have much more expertise than those who just support it. Anyway, that's my personal opinion. Don't take it for as general attitude of the interviewers. But if you ask me for the suggestion for the certification, I will recommend Hortonworks certification because it requires more hands-on compared to Cloudera, where there are only 60 questions, and probably they might change the exam patterns too. Then you might consider Cloudera also. Okay. So that being said, let me review where my code snippets or scripts and presentations are. So my GitHub repository account is D Gajraju. So you can search for D Gajraju in GitHub and you will get my account. In that there is a repository called code. Click on the code and there is a directory called Hadoop. So the base directory is called as repository. So code is the repository and Hadoop is the directory in which I have a directory called administration. And if you want to go with Cloudera, use Cloudera for PPTs and scripts. They are almost similar. I just replaced Cloudera with Hortonworks. That's it. Hortonworks or Ambari. Cloudera Manager, wherever it is in the PPTs. For Hortonworks version of PPTs, I just replaced those stuffs. Rest of the stuff is same. Scripts also mostly similar, but there will be some differences, and you will understand that once we start exploring. So you can see a bunch of scripts here. They have extension with .txt because I created like that because some people tend to execute, download and execute if it is like with .sh extension, which I don't want. That's why I have created one with .txt. All the files in the scripts are actual scripts for each component. Okay. And how to download? It's very simple. click on the main repository and click on clone or download, and it will download a zip file. Okay, but if it works, don't download, directly view from the page itself, especially scripts part of it. I think presentations will not be open in GitHub, so you cannot help it. But when it comes to scripts, they are plain text files. So view it from the GitHub only, so that if I update any scripts, I will commit immediately and it will reflect. Okay, so over time you will have correct versions for the scripts. For PPTs you can download, and you might have to download multiple times over time. Okay, so this is the GitHub account. So my battery is drying up. It will crash anytime soon. So for today, this is it. Sorry for ending the session quicker than expected. I will try to cover up this time, probably 15 minutes, by taking additional 15 minutes over next few classes. So another question, sir, an out-of-topic question with respect to how to develop a course. Which playlist do we need to watch for yesterday's class? So don't bring the developer questions into this. It will break the momentum, but I will answer this because we are at the beginning of the course itself, but don't do it. Send me an email, or you can call me also. So if you go to the videos I have uploaded yesterday, and when you start watching,
so now we will start with Hadoop introduction.
You can click on that link and it will take you to the playlist. And I have told to refer to HDFS commands, related stuff for the hands-on purpose for yesterday's class as well as next class. Okay, so this is how I will annotate, so that you don't need to worry much about which one should be watched after the class. Okay, I will emphasize in the class also, and also I will annotate as part of the videos, and you can get that information. If it is irritating, then you can actually close it.
So now we will start with Hadoop introduction.
Okay. And then you will not see those annotations, because in some videos I might have 3 or 4 annotations.
So let's
it might be irritating for people. So
with the slides, if you have any questions on this topic,
okay.
Unless
so that being said,
a very important question. Don't
that is fine.
We will talk.
I can understand that,
towards
but
the end of the session as part of the Q&A.
Don't bring the development questions
Okay.
into the initiation class, or initiation questions into the development class.
As part of the Q&A from the next class, you can ask any
Okay then,
questions.
I cannot take any topics also because it can die.
So make a note of your
So
questions.
we'll wrap up for
And
today.
try to
And we
ask
will catch up on the next
towards
class.
the end.
And
If that
it's very
is
important
on that particular
follow
slide,
videos
and
so that you
if
can
some concept has
understand
to be clarified,
more
then
in
you
detail
can,
about
ping
AWS.
me in the chat.
And
Okay, so
and what
we will
the
get into the
so that you can
360
start
big data, and then we will talk
starting
about
from
Google, how
starting
to
after Thursday's class.
Google's white papers.
Okay, thank you. Bye.